This is a Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, Mid-Atlantic Weather Outlook. It's been a long time, but I definitely want to bring these back for our viewing here. So what are we going to discuss today? We'll look at the morning cold, current conditions around the area, the rest of the week, and kind of the rest of October as we look into the long range. So let's start off this morning. It definitely was cold. You can see here on the map that there were freeze warnings in all these purple areas, and actually there's some places not highlighted here that are all in frost advisories. Again, we'll get this repeated tonight in a lot of areas. I know I didn't get down below freezing here in Percival, Virginia, which is where I live, but areas around here definitely did. You can see the scattered low 30s and below freezing temperatures around the region. There were some clouds as well as some breezes that kind of kept up the temperature. So let's look at that. We can look at the current sky condition. This may be a little bit aged now, but you can see some scattered scattered clouds here. They came across. These are producing some snow showers and snow accumulation out in the highest elevations of the western mountains here in Virginia. There were even some reports of snow flurries all the way down into North Carolina yesterday. Snowshoe getting its fair share of some snow, light snow. This is cold enough. You can see here, even on radar, that there's some moisture being picked up on radar in the upper levels. This isn't really reaching the ground, but it did cause cloudiness, which probably capped some of the temperatures that we saw overnight. So let's go and look at the models. We'll look at the short range, mid-range, and long range to see kind of what's going on weather-wise here. So we'll start off looking at a high-resolution model. This is the NAM. It's just a high-resolution model here in the area. You can see this picking up some of these snow showers and things. There probably should be some up here in the mountains. But in general, what you're seeing, you can see this sagginess to the lines and these cold blue lines. 540 below is where the freezing temperatures usually are. Anything below 540 in the upper levels of the atmosphere, so including all the region out here, it could support snow this time of year. I think the surface would be a little warm unless you get below the 534 line. Anyway, we've seen lake effect snow. We've seen some snow out in West Virginia and some accumulations up in the upper parts of the Great Lakes. So all we're going to do is we're going to move this forward to see what is happening weather-wise. And you can see that the cold air is around. It's pretty entrenched. So tonight we're going to see definitely colder temperatures. I think obviously because one, we should have less clouds, two, less wind. So the chances are that tomorrow morning we should see even colder temperatures. You see the 540 line is starting to retreat, and by later this week, that 540 line is going to retreat up late on Thursday, and then into Friday, it's definitely retreated much further north. So we definitely see a warming trend. It's going to be a nice weekend, I believe. Highs in the 70s. So we start to see that warmer trend even into Friday, into early Saturday, as the winds have turned southerly now, and definitely warming up our temperatures. In order to get a real sense of what's happening, let's look at the upper levels. Now, this is a lower resolution model. So you can see much more of a broad brush paint on both the precipitation as well as areas. But you do see, I mean, this is where we saw the cold temperatures. Here we are in Virginia and North Carolina, South Carolina, and up to Pennsylvania. You see that it is showing this snow, the lake effect snow up here in the north in Pennsylvania. And as we move this forward, what we're going to see is we'll see that low pressure system that's causing a trough or a dip here in the jet stream. That low and everything starts to move out as we get later in the period. And as it does, the colder temperatures will retreat. And now we're on the southwesterly winds. These lines of isobars here are showing winds change, high pressure, clockwise flow. We're going to see that warmer air get pushed up from the south into the region of the Mid-Atlantic. So this weekend is looking very nice. And if you haven't gone out and seen the foliage, it's definitely worth it, especially up towards the hills and the mountains now. They are getting close to peak, if not already at peak. So totally worth a look. Now you can see there's not a lot of moisture or precipitation. That's going to be something we're going to need to watch overall over the next 7 days. But I think beyond that, we should see some things that are different. Now, there's a total shift here. We had a big trough here on the East Coast, and now we have a big trough out here in the West, causing a good Rocky Mountain snowstorm. And we have this this low here, and this should start to move kind of towards the northeast as we go forward. This is definitely a good indicator that finally the Rockies are going to get their first snowstorm, and it's going to move northeast. This is quite the wound-up system. There could be blizzard-like conditions here in North Dakota, South Dakota, not Carolina. We stay on the warm side here. Obviously, east has some strong southerly winds out in front of it. So we could see some really warm temperatures next week, as this is a fairly potent low-pressure system. Now, when the precipitation gets to us, the question is how strong will it be? It looks like it weakens somewhat as it reaches our region, but the low up in Canada is very strong. So although the amount of moisture and precipitation, which we are going to start needing because it's been so dry, it's just going to be really a big change here in the wind directions for a period of time. And now we see another dip on the backside of this low pressure system because it's so strong. It's going to bring in cold air, but this isn't going to last super long. It does slow down some, so that does allow like another dip in colder temperatures. So we do see that. And we're looking pretty far out now. This is valid about a little more than a week from today. So cold air could be on the horizon at that point. But we also see that there is more moisture in low pressure systems coming into the west coast. And what that usually means is that we're going to see warmer air kind of flood into the region. So although it does look like maybe we get a brief cool down next week, which is a little bit unexpected, compared to what some of the models were showing before, I think this is very temporary and it'll move on out. So let's take a look at that in the upper levels. But once we get about 5 to 7 days and beyond, I mean, obviously we're looking at far into the future and we're not going to see the best look to forecast. So hold on, let's see how things pan out in the longer range. So instead of going too far with the surface, because we know the surface isn't right, we started to look at the upper levels to see what's going on. And this is today. We see this lobe of cold air that kind of broke off from the polar vortex, which is up here. Polar vortex always happens. It's just a matter of whether or not we get pieces of it or it tilts around the poles. And this year it's been kind of wobbly, so it's kind of got these little pieces that have been breaking off, which have caused us to be a little cooler than we have been in the past. But this is right now. So we're going to quickly kind of move forward. You're going to see the upper levels. This is 850 millibar. It's a little bit above our heads. You can see that cold air is retreating, that lobe or that break off that we saw before. Retreats up into Canada. And now you get that trough or the colder air moving into the west. So that's what we're seeing there. Now this is the European. And this is the short range look on that piece. But now let's go into the GFS, which will give us the global forecast model will show us kind of further into the future. So that was through about midweek. We're seeing a very similar look here on the GFS, but now we're seeing that big storm that we saw on the maps really cranking up, giving the Rockies in the west a bit of a cool down. Now it's going to go up north. It's a big low. So in this case, in the GFS, it actually grabs onto some cold air and yanks it down into the United States here in the east and temporarily really cools us down. That is quite the look there. There's nothing going to keep this in place because we already see there's more troughiness or low pressure crashing to the west coast. So that's going to push things along eventually here. So the cold that we see next week should be brief. And then that moves out, although there is a little bit of a kick from maybe another low off the East Coast. I'm not sure we can really count on that. But in general, what I'm seeing here is more of a zonal flow or low pressure systems or the jet stream kind of lining up like this across the country. Maybe a little bit of wiggly up into Canada, but in general, the whole United States looks like it's going to really warm up towards the end of the period. So in the longer range, we look like we go briefly cool again after a warm up weekend into early next week, and then we get a brief cool down again. It could be a pretty dramatic quick shot of cold air. And then it looks like we really get a mild pattern. This does not look like it's going to be cold, and it looks like the cold air is kind of getting locked up here in Canada. I'm not seeing some of that troughiness or those little lobes kind of breaking off. So that's kind of the long-range look of things at this point. So here's what we look like. We look warm into early next week. Cold fronts can come through, cool us down for a few days, and then it looks like by the time that we get into right around Halloween, things start to warm up again. Again, this is way far out. Things can change pretty dramatically, but that's how things look today. Now, this was put out yesterday showing the longer range forecast, and I think on average we will be above normal, but with that quick little shot of cold air next week, I suspect this may change a little bit. This was showing a pretty good strong feeling that we're going to get above normal. from the 6 to 10 and 8 to 10 day period, 8 to 14 day period. I think the 6 to 10 may stay pretty close to this or normal on a trend of average. But, cold air is going to somewhere be in here. So I want to see what the Common Prediction Center does this afternoon around it. And then if we go a little bit further here, let's see here. I think we look at the precipitation. So again, with that front coming in, they're thinking maybe some increase in moisture. I think, again, this may change to more normal. Looking at the models today, that front that comes through is just going to drop a little bit of rain. It doesn't look like a major amount of rain. And a coastal low that looks like it may be here tomorrow. If we looked on that back of that model, we saw it kind of off the East Coast, not on the coast. So that means maybe we're not as wet as we probably need to be. I already looked at the long range, so I'm not going to really go through that at this point. We saw that it looked like we were going to warm up, then cool down for a little bit, but ultimately kind of get to a mild pattern or warmer than normal pattern as we head into early November. And honestly, that is the outlook for Tuesday, October 19th, 2022. Have a good one.